We are in the last leaks of our Genesis study. Let's see how far we can go for chapters 10 and 11. These are the two chapters which we will find that there is a lot of information, and sometimes it appears quite boring. And we don't understand why there's so many names. And so I'll try to help us understand why it's so important that we have these two chapters, right? Well, one of the questions that we need to ask ourselves is this: how can there be so many races in the world if we are all descendants of Adam and Eve? And we call them races mainly because we don't have a better word. I think the Bible doesn't use the word race. So the Bible is not racist. The Bible calls them by tongues or the languages, tribes, and nations. The Bible does not designate and differentiate colors of skin, but the Bible differentiates by the tribes, the families, and the languages they speak and where they live, rather than by the color of the skin. And so the Bible doesn't talk about race. Acts chapter 17, verse 26 says this. I think we should be quite familiar with this verse. And have made one blood all nations of men for to dwell on the face of the earth, and has determined the times before appointed, and the boundaries of their habitation. And so we talk about the people, and God uses the term one blood. We are of the same blood. And we talk about the boundaries of where they live. And so the Bible actually describes that the boundaries of the nations, of the families, and the territories are all there as God has laid out to be. One of the things that we have recently discovered, not very long ago, is that the difference in skin color is very much by the pigmentation, right? It's a color skin pigmentation. It is just a different amounts of it. Based on the genes study, we apparently have dominant and recessive genes, and the dominant recessive genes comprising of, say, AA and BB, AA and BB with a small b. So there are four little toggles or switches. So the small letter will be the recessive, the big letters will be the dominant. If all dominant genes are turned on, then it is a very dark color here, okay, as we can see, very dark color. And then as it goes all the way to the end, all recessive, we will get what we call albino, all pale, no color. And then we get all the mixtures in between. And that's all where people call races. They are not races, they are just different skin color. And so different skin color, there are dark people who are naturally not dark. I have a friend who plays golf every day, and by which time he used to be very fair, and then he is just as dark as an Indian, but he is Chinese. So you can actually get pigmentation genes turned on because of the sun, right? And so this is what we will get where different environments that we are exposed to causes us to have different amount of skin pigments. And one of the things that you eventually will see is that those of you who teach Sunday school, in the early days, Adam and Eve were Caucasians, very fair. Nowadays, because of this study, Adam and Eve is, voila, brown. Because with all those genes inside, you can go left or right. And so Adam and Eve had all the pigmentation that can generate all the different skin colors that we have today. You know, red and yellow, black and white. If you look at some of these twins, you really surprise you. They are actually twins, but one brown and one white. One brown, one white. Now, in the old days, of course, they have all kinds of tales of what happened to one of the spouse. But today we know much better. It is because of the heritage, the ancestry of one of the parents who may have a dark-skinned relative. And then in that generation, that one dark-skinned gene was turned on. So in one of the twin, it will be dark, one of the twin, it's fair. But they are twins. They are actually from the same set of parents. Look at all these, the Elmer twins. And they are twins from the same parent. So now let's get to Genesis chapter 10. This is what we call the Table of Nations. And let me just give you a little introduction. Nowhere else on earth do you find an explanation of where all the nationalities come from, where all the nations come from, where all the tribes come from, where all the languages come from. So chapter 10 and 11 explains this. And so this is God's perspective of how he wants us to understand, and he relates to us in this fashion. Now, it could have been done in any other way, but this was the way that it was explained to us in the text so that we can follow what he is trying to tell us. So Genesis chapter 10 tells us the Table of Nations. If you have the chance to read Acts chapter 17, reading from verse 22, I will strongly encourage you to go back and spend time to study this, because this is Paul's only sermon and only preaching of the gospel to people who are not Jews, right? Who are not Jews. And it describes all these things about one blood of all nations of men on the face of the earth, the bounds of their habitation. All these are important. But more important is the gospel message to all nations to seek the Lord, find him, right? Repent, and judgment and resurrection from the dead. These are the elements of the gospel to the non-Jews, and they are told as nations of the world. So in Genesis chapter 10, it begins this. These are the generations of the sons of Noah. And remember, in the Old Testament times, these are all what we call very patriarchal. Patriarchal means the generations are traced by the sons, not the daughters. And then what we do have is, we have Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and we want to answer the question. Shem, Ham, and Japheth, who is the oldest? Okay, and that's the question we will answer today. These were the sons that were born after the flood, right? So take note of this, which means that they never had a child in the ark. These were the ones that were outside the ark after the waters had subsided. This is a summary of all the families. And this is what you can draw yourself when you read Genesis chapter 10 and 11, where the genealogy is done. Why is genealogy important? So that you can trace who your fathers were, right? See? Gomer, Yavan, right? Cush, Mitzrayim, Canaan, right? And all this goes up to Arphaxad, right? So spend some time when you read this. Don't just read the words and it will put you to sleep. Read the words to plot the ancestry chart. Let me just give you a little bit of highlight. I highlight, oops, can't see. Yovab, right here, okay? Yovab. And Yovab is probably, let's see, where are we? Yovab is to cry out. This is what it means, all right? And perhaps some say that this could be related to Job, right? Yovab would be father of Job. Job, right? So father of Job, basically. Now the other one is this one here. Eber. Eber is where we get the word Ivri, where we have the word in English Hebrew, right? So it is likely that Eber is the father of all Hebrews. But we are interested in this line that goes to Peleg all the way down to Avram and Ishak and Yaakov. That's Jacob. Okay, this is the line that we're talking about. So let's look at Shem. Now, many of you may have heard me talk about the name, right? The name in Hebrew is Shem, yes. So Shem, as one of the sons of Abraham, is name, right? That's his name. Character. Character. And that is the lineage that God has chosen to carry on his plan. Now, in the story of Shem, we would have Arphaxad and then we have Peleg, right? Peleg was when the earth was divided. And so there is a number of understanding. What do you mean the earth was divided? The earth was divided in a few ways that people were explaining, right? First of all, you need to understand that after the water subsided, the continental shelves were exposed. The continental shelves are the extension of the continents, and they interconnect all the continents together so that you can actually walk from Alaska to Australia. They are all interconnected, meaning if today, if the water would have gone down by 30 meters, that would be about 100 feet, you can walk anywhere in the world. And so the water had subsided, and then there was a melting of the ice caps, and then the water rose again. But once the water rose again, then the continents were divided. That's what some people say, right? They were able to map out, as in a ruler, how the old maps look like, or the terrain looks like, in terms of division. But what we do know is this: it is not the shifting of continents, because the moment you have the plates move, you have the worldwide upheaval all over again. So they didn't move. So the word map out or divided is actually about having a ruler, and then you divide the markings on the ruler. That is what divided actually means. And so largely many of us think that it is a time where the maps of the world were were mapped out in that sense. The other one that we are interested is Israel, Jacob, Isaac, right? These are all the people that is traced all the way down, and hence we start the calling of Abraham and the nation of Israel from there on. Now, Islamic sources tells us this, for information, right? That the Arabs say that they are from Ishmael. No, they're not, right? Muhammad claims to be from Ishmael, but we don't think so. I don't think so. Okay, this is where Ishmael is. The Arabs are all these families. And these are the families that is from Shem, which also tells us that the Arabs are Shemites. So let me just write the word. Shem. They're Shemites, right? They are from Shem. But the chosen line is not of Shem. It's not of Ishmael. Not here. It is here. And so we need to be very clear, although it's from Abraham. So Arabs are not Ishmaelites. So now we take a look at Ham. That's how it's pronounced. Ham, not ham. Ham is what you eat in the morning, right? In the story of Ham, or the genealogy, there were a couple of names that were highlighted. One of them is actually Nimrod. Nimrod means to rebel, and it is a time during the descendants of Ham that they were turning. See, Cush was the father of Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. Means he went to conquer. He's a mighty hunter before God, in the face of God. And this is what is said about Nimrod. And he gathered the people together to defy God. And so we have legends about Nimrod. Now this is what every one of us are interested in. What about the Chinese? Now, I'm not saying that this is where the Chinese come from. I'm saying that these are interesting verses. All right? Isaiah chapter 49, verse 12. He says, "Behold, these shall come from afar, and behold, these shall come from the north and the west, and these shall come from the land of Sain," or Sein. This is how it's pronounced. It's Sein. And this one is actually found in the Dead Sea Scroll and the Masoretic text. And this is about Sinim. It is a distant oriental region, and that's how they would describe this. But this is nevertheless a translator view, okay? I happen to share this view that I think even in the time of Isaiah, the Chinese were already prominent, but they are not called Chinese. They are called Sinim, from the land of Sin. And the Chinese is called Sino. Okay? Now in Genesis 10, we find these words as well. Canaan fathered the firstborn. We have Heth, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Arkites, and the Sinites, which is supposedly the Chinese, right? Supposedly. So I use that word. Now we look at Japheth. And again, I have tried to explain to you, this is a Y sound. So it's Japheth. Okay, that's how it's pronounced. And now with Japheth, we come to a few interesting history. Japheth is about the Medes. That's, remember, in the second empire that took over from Babylon, Medo-Persia. These are the Medes, Madai. And then they are the Magog. The Gog and Magog, they are the Scythians, the Parthians. They are the Aryans. They occupy Persia and North India, where we get the present-day Brahmins. And they are, well, if you know North India, they are where the Bollywood comes from, right? All the Miss World. They are not the Southern Indians who are dark-skinned. These are Northern Indians who are actually Aryans. They are from Magog. And they came from Persia into North India and occupied that territory. And they introduced the caste system so that they are not diluted in intermarriage. And they are always kept their looks and their tribe together. So there are no intertribal marriage in that sense. So the Brahmins are the ones that rule the country, so to speak. And hence, for many, many years, that's where they come from. Now you find Hitler is about the same. The blue eye, blonde hair, and Hitler believed that he can create the super race, and that the Jews is just one rung above the apes. And so killing the Jews is actually okay because they are very close to animals. And hence, that's the understanding of their evolution theory. Okay? Now, with that, we also have a name called Tarshish. Some of them believe that they are the islands of Crete. It probably would be higher up, I think, would be the British Isles. And trade went all the way to Tarshish. Togarmah, we know it's Turkey because even today in Turkey, you do have records of the house of Togarmah. Yavan is Greece, we know that for a fact. Meshech is Russia. Tiras is Italy. Goma is the area between Austria and Germany. Elisha is Cyprus. Kittim are the Hittites. We don't know exactly where the Hittites are, maybe south of Turkey. Dodanim is Crete. Now we have these, and that's as far as we do know, all right? Now one of the names that I forgot to tell you is here. Mizraim. Mizraim is the son of Ham, right? Son of Canaan, and he's from Egypt. So Egypt was never called Egypt. Egypt was called Mizraim. Mizraim speaks of a land that's divided into two parts. Many people think it's north and south. I think it's east and west because the division of either the Nile or the Red Sea. Right? So this is the east and this is the west. So now let me just briefly summarize this part. You would see that the Japheth, the sons of Japheth, is covered in this part of the territory, which is what we call Europe. And that's why Europeans are how Europeans are, the Caucasians. Okay? We have Shem very much in this area. Shem. And this would be the Middle East. All right? And then we have Ham. Ham is along here. Okay? This would be the the Africa region. And the Chinese came from here all the way there. All right. So this is roughly where they are. It's not as clear cut as that, but it will give you an idea. So the map gives you an idea of the descendants where they moved around. Now, of course, they moved around, but generally that's where they are. So you must always remember, in the early days, national territory are actually tribal lands. Tribal lands. Okay? And then you have this word. Oops. This is not Stan, as in Stanley, it is Stan. So you get Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, Turkestan, and all the stans. Stan means land, and in the old days they were divided by tribes. And so they migrated, as you can tell, right? All over the place, right? All over the place. So because people moved around, we cannot really tell where they originate from. Now, let me just tell you just very briefly, this is where the flood was. And by the time Noah died, just look at this line. Who is around? Who is around? Abraham is around. Okay? And so, if Abraham wanted to learn about what happened in the flood, he could have spoken to Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. First-hand knowledge. So in terms of age, one of the usefulness of long life is that you can pass down history mouth to mouth without going through too many mouths, basically, until it is written down. And so that's the point of long lives as well. By the time Noah died at 950, Abraham was 58. Maybe one of the things you want to do is to count. How do you get 58? And so I have this slide, and this is how you get to 58. All right? And you just add them up. But notice, you get two genealogies to work together. Chapter 5, chapter 11, and chapter 9. And if you don't read all of these together, you will never get the actual numbers. So now let's answer this question. Shem, Ham, and Japheth, who is the oldest son of Noah? And if we can identify the oldest son of Noah, we should be able to identify who is the youngest son and the middle son. And I had mentioned to you earlier on was that Shem, Ham, and Japheth, all of them, if you play Mastermind, you have the white pins and you have the black pins. In this case, Shem, Ham, and Japheth has no pins, which means that their order of the name is completely not in accordance to their age. So the first clue we have is here, that Noah was 500 years old and he had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, one thing for sure, when Shem, Ham, and Japheth were born, was it at the same time? Were they triplets? Because it says at 500 years, bang, 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 3 of them were born. Well, they could be triplets, or that was the time when Noah started to have children. And he had 3 when he was 500 years old and above. Now, that's how it should be read. All right? Now, in Genesis chapter 7, it says, on the same day, all these were done. So this is 600 years. So within 5 to 600 years, he had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and they grew up and they had wives. So we do know that it is always Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So traditionally, we would always have said Shem is number 1, Ham is number 2, and Japheth is number 3. And I told you that in Mastermind, no pins. So let's review the translation of the Bible. In Genesis chapter 10, verse 21, so we have this, whose older brother was Japheth, or Shem, the older brother of. So it could be read as if Shem is older than Japheth, or Japheth was the older brother of Shem. So how is it then? So we have the NIV 2011 version. All right. I need to tell you the dates, because the dates are important. You know that there are revisions, right, of the Bible in their translation. So in the New King James, it says that Shem is the brother of Japheth the elder. So it implies that the Japheth is the older brother, or is Shem the older brother? That's the problem of the translation. Everybody has footnotes. So Japheth is the older brother, but here in the footnote, then Shem is the older brother. The Amplified is the same, all right? In ESV, the elder brother of Japheth is Shem. So what gives in all our translation? Shem, Japheth's older brother. So Shem is the older brother to Japheth. Now we have this confusion. So how can we fix this problem? So I will tell you that this is how we will fix the problem. We have to read the Hebrew. So the Hebrew is very interesting, and I've translated here. You don't need to read the Hebrew. It says, he was born to Shem, even he, the father of all the sons of Eber. So Shem is the father of Eber. That's clear. The brother of Japheth, the older one. And this would be the literal translation, that the older brother of Shem is Japheth. That is how I would see the Hebrew, okay? That the brother of Shem is Japheth, and he is the older one, or the oldest one, depending on how we read in the context. But is there any other evidences? So if you look at Noah's children, it is unlikely that Noah had triplets that year. So it should read that when he was 500 years old, he began to have his 3 sons in the following years. And that would be a better way of reading this text. So we have Shem had children. Shem had children when he was okay, look at this. Shem had Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. He was 100 years old. So what are the facts that we have? We have the facts that Shem was 98 years old when the flood was over. Follow this, right? Under Genesis 11:10, we know that Shem was 100 years old when he had Arphaxad. And he had Arphaxad only after the flood. So it means that he is 98 years old when the flood was over. If he was 98 years old when the flood was over, we know that the flood was slightly over 1 year. That would place Shem at 97 years old at the time of the flood. Right? 97 years old at the time of the flood. If Noah had spent 100 years between 500 when he started to have children, and at 600 the flood began, and at this point in time Shem was 97. When do you think Shem was born? 503. You see this? 503. So Shem may not be the oldest. And so Japheth would stand to be the oldest. So who is the youngest of the three sons? So we also read in Genesis chapter 9:24 that when Noah awoke from his intoxicated state, he discovered this thing that Ham has done, the youngest one. That's the word. This implies that Ham is the youngest son. So if Ham is the youngest and Japheth is the oldest, so what does that leave us? Shem, right? Japheth, Ham, Shem would be the number 2, the middle child. Okay? And so this is how we would trace genealogy and the history from the words. Unfortunately, the English text sometimes tends to confuse us. So I hope this is clear to you. But then we always have Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Why? Very simply, this is a narrative that God wants us to pay attention first to Shem. He is the lineage of redemption, where the atonement will come. Then look at Ham. Ham is the time when all the narrative of the Tower of Babel and where the promised land is supposed to be, and they are supposed to conquer the place where Ham's descendants lived. Japheth is the end, because in the later times, in Ezekiel chapter 38, 39, that's where Israel faces a new enemy of the sons of Japheth. And so it is described in its chronological order of the history rather than the age. And that's why we have Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay? Now we will get very quickly to Genesis chapter 11, the dispersion of nations. This is what happened. The whole earth was of one language. Always must remember. Always must remember. At the time where Moses was, not Moses, sorry. At the time of the flood, they were always speaking one language, right? And one speech. And of course, if you ask the Jews, they will say, well, they are speaking Hebrew, right? Maybe they're speaking Hebrew, I don't know. But whatever it is, it's all speech. So understand, languages always begin with speech, not writing. Always with speech. After speech was when they started to document things, and that's where writing comes from. Now, 11 verse 2 then tells us, it came to pass as they journeyed from the east. Always look at this. From the east means they are going to the west. And they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and then they dwelt there. So what do you find? From the east. This is where they went. And so we know that the ark landed in the mountains of Ararat, somewhere there. And hence they went to the west, and then they ended in this area here. Now, I think it's that area because from a geography standpoint, is that all civilizations will start at the head or river area. So this case here, this is the head of the Euphrates River. And that's where they started, and it's very fertile and lots of water. That's the source of the Euphrates. And that's probably where they started to have their beginnings. So what did they do? They started to make bricks, burned them thoroughly. They had the bricks for stone, and slime they had for mortar. Okay. And then they started to build a city. Remember, a city is just a gathering of people living together. Whether they are of tens or whatever they may be. They want to build a tower, a migdal. A tower is an elevated structure. And it says, whose top may reach the heaven. And that's what we always think, wow, could they have built the KLCC, or is even taller than KLCC? It's none of those. The idea was that at the tower, everyone from afar can see them and they will make a name. They don't want to be scattered abroad, but God says to Noah, what? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That's the opposite. We think that this tower is likely to be a ziggurat, an observatory of the stars, where they had a temple, right? That's a stairway to the heavens. Verse 5. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of man had built. So God came and took a look, and it says, behold, they are one people, and they have one language. And this is the beginning of what they will do. So let us go and confuse their language. And this is where the languages were confused and they left. I believe that the confusion of language was according to families. And with families, tribes. Why? Because God is not a God that will cause confusion in a family, and they will not split the father and mother or the brother or sister, each speaking one different language. So I believe that it was all very tribal and very family oriented, but different families may speak different languages. All right? We do find that in the language family tree, there is an explanation, and that most people will find that there is an origin of language, one language. And while I guess many people think that it is Hebrew. So the Lord dispersed them, and they left the city, and the place was called Babel, called confusion. God confused the language, and they went all over. And I believe each of them, when they had their own families, spoke a different language. So the miracle of languages is this. Remember when we talked about God giving us language? Language is complex. You have to see, you have to hear, and you have to process. This whole procedure, right, is the miracle of language. It is to communicate what's inside that you can't see to the outside so that they can hear. So this is the dispersion of the nations. And by that, they can trace it by DNA and also by language groups. Now, many of you may know this word, ta, which is tower. And so with that, we have 5 major components. We have the dust of the ground, we have grass, we have people, and we have one, and we have mouth. And we have this because in the ancient Chinese, the classical Chinese, where it's more similar to drawings, this is what you see. This is what you see. Unlike the word boat or chuan, the 8 is not 8, right? The 8. So 8 is supposed to be like that. But the chuan is like that. And so this is 8, and this is not 8. But ta is interesting because it is of dust, on the grass, people, one, speech. And that represents the Tower of Babel. So we can say in the Chinese language. So very quickly, we'll end this topic. I want to show you that ancient men are very intelligent men. But for those who were not so intelligent, they are called cavemen. Cavemen lived in caves. So you need to think with me. Before that, they were able to build the Tower of Babel and all these great structures, and they had such a great civilization until God confused the language and they all left. Now let me tell you this. This is what happens. When you leave an established place and you go to an unestablished place, let's say for us, we leave KL and we go into the jungles, into the wilderness. Now, if you and I don't know how to build a house, or put up a tent, or make a shed, where would you live? Where would you live? The most natural home is a cave. And living in cave doesn't make us uncivilized, doesn't make us any less human. It's just a place where we live. We don't have handphones, we don't have torches, we don't have a Bunsen burner, we don't have gasoline. We still have to use flints and stones to make a fire. Doesn't make you any primitive. It's just a non-high-tech way of doing things. For those who have engineering skills, they would build houses on trees, right? On different places. So those families that had engineers, they will live more advanced. Those who don't have engineers, they live more primitive. Doesn't make them any less human. And in cavemen, people have found that cavemen drawings are very advanced drawings with colors and shades, not kindergarten stick drawings. Very artistic, right? And so these are the ones that were very intelligent. And there are books that you can find, Puzzle of Ancient Men, After the Flood, The Genius of Ancient Men. All of these will give you an idea of what they all did. In Iraq, they have found batteries, low voltage batteries. And what do? Most of us think that they use batteries for electrolysis, to do plating, maybe of silver or gold, of objects of worship. They have found analog computing device in the bottom of the sea, and this is really advanced. They have found that in I don't know how you pronounce this, right? This is a mouthful. Sacsayhuaman. It's in Peru. Each of these rocks weigh about 20,000 tons. How do you lift them? Right? You can't. Not even with today's technology. Okay? And so I just want to end with this. When you read the book of Genesis up to this point, I hope you see God, what He did, why He did what He did. What did man do? And what did we keep doing? Defying Him, and yet God had patience with us. Though He judged, He retained a line of redemption so that we have redemption. And that's where we ended. Where did all the people come from? Well, God spreaded them by the confusion of the language. And so at the end of chapter 11, I think one of the things that I hope that we all take away from ourselves is the fact that we can see God in everything, and that we need Him, and He is God who has arranged all these boundaries, the people, and call us all to repent. And so the Bible is really not only interesting, but it tells us where we came from and why we need God.